everyone, welcome to the show. My name is Amanda Ostrander. I'm a teacher turned homeschool mom, and this is Raising A to Z, a place where we talk about all things homeschooling, and today we're going to talk about hybrid homeschooling. I get this question all the time. Parents who are looking to homeschool their kids who want to know if they can do hybrid homeschooling. And while I do know it's an option in certain parts of the country, I'm going to talk specifically about Ontario and where we live, because here it's different. And so I know a lot of parents who want to do hybrid homeschooling. And by hybrid homeschooling, they want to be able to homeschool their kids 3 or 4 days a week, have them at home, and send them to school 1 or 2 days during the day. And they want to know if it's possible. They want to know if anyone does it. How does it work? And for the most part, I want to say it's not it's not a positive response. And parents make it seem like it would be such a great option. Like, from a parent's point of view, I understand. It sounds like the best of both worlds, right? That your kids get to experience school and they get to go and socialize on a regular basis. They can make some friends. You get to have a day or two off of homeschooling. Maybe you get to work on those days. It helps you deal with like the childcare issue. And so like I understand why, as a parent who is looking to homeschool their kids, you can see how this would be like a glorious thing. And the reality is that it's rarely the case, unfortunately. So let's talk about it. So kindergarten, it gives you this false sense that it is totally doable. So in Ontario here, kindergarten is not mandatory, which means for junior and senior kindergarten, ages 4 and 5, your kids don't have to come to school on a regular basis. So if you say, hey, I'm only going to send them 3 days a week, then you only send them 3 days a week. And that is just like, you are entitled to do that as a parent. And so I think some parents who have opted for that option think that it's a really great option for them. That they think that this is an option that is going to be able to continue. Part of that reason why it works for the kindergarten system is because the kindergarten system is essentially kind of a check system, in the sense that it's more like pass-fail. So basically they're going to let you know what skills your kids have and what skills your kids don't have, rather than like, oh, you got 90% on your letter of like understanding or like recognition. It's a different system. So basically kids in kindergarten have essentially kind of almost like a checklist of skills they need to be able to complete by the end of the 2 years. And so when you're homeschooling your kids, often you can work on those like checklist items at home without it significantly interfering with school, because a lot of the school is kind of like, it's a play-based learning and it's very open-ended. And so it works with the kindergarten system, and they do allow it. So parents often think that it is going to continue being accessible and being feasible, and that they're going to be able to do it. Once your kids are in first grade in Ontario, you essentially have to make a choice. Are you going to homeschool, or are you going to send them to school? Most public schools will not allow part-time homeschooling. It is just not something that they will do on a regular basis. I have seen a few schools or few school boards that have done it. It is very much on a case-by-case basis, and it is very much on a like situation-by-situation basis. For what I see more commonly is they will allow it for in very specific circumstances. So if you have a child who is medically fragile or is going through like significant medical treatments, they might, allow them to come to school 3 days a week instead of the full 5, so that they can have some rest days in their week. Or if you have a child who has autism, and they're finding that a full day or a full week is too much, especially if you're having a lot of behavioral issues and aggressions, they might allow for part-time homeschooling. Even that's pretty rare. And then in terms of like high school, I've seen them allow part-time homeschooling And often it's for kids who have issues with mental health issues. So coming to school for a full day is too much for them. And they've had like a series of issues that have come up. It's a very complicated thing. They've been in and out of school. They've dropped out, they come back, they've dropped out, they come back. They've done, homeschooling for a bit, and it's just trying to find a way to accommodate them to actually be in school. For the most part though, Ontario, you gotta pick or choose. And I know it's frustrating for you as a parent who thought this was going to be an option and think it would be a great option and you'd love for it to continue. And while I understand, unless your system is set up for that, as a teacher, former teacher, I can tell you that would be my ultimate nightmare. Let me explain. So part of the reason why hybrid homeschooling doesn't work in Ontario is because it becomes very much an issue, and it's not allowed in many areas. Like Ontario is not unique in that situation. But one of the biggest reasons is because it becomes an issue of who is legally responsible for a child's academics. That's the first big issue. Because if a kid is in school, it becomes the school is legally responsible for their academics. The school is responsible for making sure that they are learning all the lessons they need to learn, that they're hitting all the curriculum that's being mandated, all of that. When you're homeschooling your kids, you are legally responsible for educating your children, and you're responsible for making sure that they are learning what they need to learn and that they are going to be able to be sufficient, self-sufficient, strong, capable adults when they're done. The issue becomes when you start hybrid homeschooling is who is responsible for what? Who is going to be in charge of what? And how do you maintain that level of responsibility and that legal responsibility? And it does become a very tricky thing, because if your kid is only going to school 1 or 2 days a week, what are they going to do at school? Like how it becomes like, it's a tricky thing. Like, I don't think you understand how hard it is, like as a teacher. The other things that come up, for example, how would your child complete any assignments that are due in school, or do a test, or the things if they're only in school 1 day a week or 2 days a week? How would they do that? Because they're missing all the information that is specific to that assignment or to that thing. They're missing it on the 3 days that they're not there. They're missing the time to work on it on those 3 days that are not there. And yes, I guess you could be doing it at home, but that's an issue we'll talk about in a minute. So your kids are missing information. They're missing time to work on it. They're missing all these things that are happening in the school system because they're at home. And parents are like, well, I'll just teach them what they're learning in school. It is not that simple. It is not that simple. Because essentially, if that was what you're doing, you are wanting the teacher, someone would have to take responsibility. And because the teacher is now in charge of, let's say, 25 students, they're making the assignment. For example, let's say the assignment for language, and this is what we're learning this week in language. They're going to make that assignment for their 25 students. So you don't get to dictate to her or him what the assignment is going to be. It would be going the other way. So now you're doing the schoolwork anyway, and things come up. Timetables change. For example, maybe the kids are, they've decided that they're going to do something, they're going to change the assignment a little bit. Or maybe they're like, we had an assembly that we weren't anticipating, or a fire drill. So the kids lost time. So now they're going to need an extra day to work on that. Well, now that's thrown you off to get that done because it's not going to match. So that's like, just the logistics of that is like incredible. There's also so many things that happen, like I said, in a classroom that are going to impact how things are working. And it's just a really it would be incredibly complicated for you as a parent to have a kid in a school system because you're now having to match the school system. So let's say your kid goes every Thursday, Friday. Just make it easy. They go on Thursdays and Fridays. They've missed everything that's happening Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. They're not getting to they're missing that camaraderie on those days. So their, class is kind of in a sense, almost become like a family. So now you have a family member who's like in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out. It makes for weird dynamics in the classroom, which is like another thing that just really makes it difficult for the teacher. It's hard to figure out who's legally going to be in charge of like what subjects, because in schools, they have to do so many, it's not just like, oh, they can do these things. They have to do so many hours of their subjects in order to get the credit. They have to do an hour of literacy or so many minutes of literacy every day. They have to do, so many minutes of math. They have to do so many minutes of science. If your kid is missing those lessons, like, it's hard for them. Like, they can't legally say, oh yeah, we know that they know all the stuff. It becomes a much bigger issue. So hybrid homeschooling, I know parents think would be a great option. It becomes a really big, difficult issue. It also, it becomes a logistical nightmare. Like I said, teachers having to keep everything that happened that day so that they're on track for what happens the next day. Like, that is just like a really unrealistic expectation. And it's a really high stress to put on a teacher to now handle kids who are not in their classroom and making sure that they're learning so that they're matching what's happening in the group, right? Because if they're all having assignments due on the same day, then there's that. If they're all, let's say on Friday they're having a spelling test. Well, the spelling test got moved. Does it mean your kid doesn't? And they're like, oh, well, we're going to move it because something happened. Well, now your kid's sitting there going like, well, what do I do? Or if you miss, like, it just becomes a logistical nightmare. It also becomes like a logistical nightmare in terms of like who's present on what days, because it starts to become like a truancy issue. And you're like, oh, well, it'd be in the records, but like, it becomes a nightmare in the sense of like, if you have kids who are attending, let's say your kid attends Thursday and Friday. That's how they normally attend school, Thursdays and Fridays. Okay. So what happens if there's a fire drill? And let's say the school does fire drills on Mondays. Your kid doesn't know how to do a fire drill because your kid is never there on Mondays. Or let's say there's a field trip, but they had to schedule on a Tuesday or a Wednesday. Well, is your kid going to miss the field trip even though everyone else is going? Are they now going to miss out on learning those things because they don't go on Thursday? Like, what if there's an assignment based off of the play that they went to see on Wednesday? So you're like, oh, well, I'll just send them on Wednesday. Okay, so are they now going on Thursday? Because now it's not the same split that you had agreed to. And so now your teacher has an extra student, or they're not going to be there on Thursday, which they normally would be there on Thursday, so the teacher can't do those assignments. It becomes like a whole logistical nightmare in terms of like managing that many kids and that many people. And teaching is already a logistical nightmare of managing that many kids and that many people, but adding in kids who are coming in and out and have different schedules and different needs and different wanting to like interact with parents. Basically, they'd have to meet with you like every single day to tell you what they're doing the next day. And it's just a mess. In a typical public school, it is just a mess to hybrid homeschool. And I don't think parents understand that because they're like, oh, but my kids would get to socialize and they get to spend time with friends. I think people greatly overestimate how much socialization is happening in schools. Like, kids are not sitting there chatting up with their buddies all day long. Like, they're not doing that. They're sitting in their desks. They're doing their work. They're doing what's being assigned. The teacher is talking to them. They're reading, they're writing, they're doing their work. And then they have these small moments. They have like 20 minutes in morning recess, 20 minutes in afternoon recess, maybe a little time at lunch, unless you have a school that has implemented silent lunches, which apparently is a thing now. So your kids don't get that much time to socialize. Yes, they get a little bit here and maybe they get a little bit of group work time, but like they're not getting everything. They're not getting as much socialization as I think most parents think they are. That'd be the equivalent of you going to work and calling it socialization. You're like, oh, I went to work today and I sat at my desk and I worked on these reports, but I saw someone at lunch for 20 minutes and chatted with them during my lunch break. And then I like went back and finished this report. And then I did this audit and then I did this report. And then I said goodbye to them on my way out the door. How much time did you actually socialize? That's the school equivalent, is that scenario right there. So if you're concerned about socialization, I have entire videos about socialization, entire playlists. Go check them out. But find ways to socialize your kid. Find ways to, there's lots of, join a co-op or start a co-op. Some co-ops don't have, co-ops don't have to be educational. They can just be like meetups. Meet up with friends regularly. Join a homeschool class or homeschool group. Set up play dates. Go to the park. There's lots of things that you can do to socialize your kids that does not involve putting them in school. And the idea of putting them in school as socialization is just, it's not a good idea. If that's your sole reason for putting them in school is for socialization, you can do the same thing outside of school without the stress of homeschooling. If you're looking at putting them in school because you want, because of childcare needs, that's a different story, right? Like I know some parents were like, hey, I really would love to send them to school so that they could do 2 days of work 2 days a week or something like that. That's a different story. And in which case it would be time to look at different options. Maybe you need to hire a nanny for those days. Maybe you can find a family member or a friend who can watch them. Find a homeschool family who's willing to trade off. Like, hey, if you want 2 days, you take my kids for 2 days after a certain time. I'll take your kids for 2 days. Something like that. If you have someone who can work that out with. I know some parents really love forest schools. Forest schools can be a really great option. It's like a private school, but it's in an outdoor private school. And they are, unfortunately, they're only really, I haven't seen many that run past 2nd or 3rd grade. But basically they're kind of like a outdoor childcare school type situation. And I know a lot of homeschoolers who love that. They do use that kind of in that kind of situation where it's a learning, socialization, childcare covering thing for them. So that's an option if you can find one near you. Maybe it's something you might want to check out. But yeah, hybrid homeschooling with a public system is very, very difficult. I have heard of a few private schools, private where you pay tuition, schools allowing it. It does get a little bit trickier in that sense, because it's probably going to cost you a lot more money. But I have heard of some schools allowing it or for the kids come in at a certain time every day to just do math or something like that. I have seen that happen in private schools. And there are some alternative schools in Canada. I don't know if there's not many. I wish there were more alternative schools because I think they could be really great for our educational system. But sometimes families find great success with alternative schools. We have cousins. My husband has cousins who went to an alternative school in Alberta, and we were like, that is amazing. It literally sounded like the coolest thing. The kids only had to go, they had 1 day they had to go, and then the teachers were basically just there to assist, and they could come in whenever they needed. Basically, teachers had office hours. It was a really cool system. But anyway, back to the main point of does hybrid homeschooling work? In the current situation set up in Ontario, it is a very, very difficult situation to do. It is a very difficult situation to make work. Like I said, I have heard of a few boards agreeing to it. I've heard of it more so after the pandemic when they're just trying to get more students. But it does create a lot of tension for parents. It creates a lot of tension for teachers. And it creates a lot of tension between parents and teachers. A lot of stress. Because like I said, who's in charge of what becomes the issue. And one of the things with homeschooling is we get to follow our kids' interests and follow their strengths. And if we need to take a little bit longer to do something, then we do it. If we want to move faster, then we're moving faster. And when you're working with a teacher in that sense, you're on their schedule and their timetable and what they're teaching when they want to teach it and how it's going to be taught. So, my kids would never be able to do a fashion unit because that's not in the school system. They wouldn't be able to, learn about certain things because it's just not, my kids wanted to learn about space when she was 5. That's not in the school system until 5th grade. Those would not be things that we'd be allowed to do. And so if you want to look into it, you can definitely ask your local school board. I'm just saying it's a lot of work. It's a lot of stress for everybody. It could be a very frustrating situation, and that's if they even allowed it. So, like I said, I think Alberta has hybrid homeschooling, but they have hybrid homeschooling schools, essentially, where it's a very different setup. So if you're in Alberta and that's something you want, check it out. Go for it. But yeah, in terms of Ontario specifically, it's a really difficult thing to make work, unfortunately. So maybe not the answer you were hoping for, but hopefully the answer that explains why. And maybe that can help you guys in navigating that situation. Don't forget to subscribe. Consider becoming a member. When you can become a YouTube member to my channel, you get some great bonus content. You get early releases. There's like all kinds of stuff that happens when you get to become a member. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok for more ideas and inspiration. And I will see you guys next week. Bye.